Irgang. I'm from the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation. We're pleased to just provide this opportunity for a new leader in our community to be introduced to other community members. I will start by telling a very quick story. I'm not going to introduce anything about Dr. DeMarte because I think you're going to hear everything you need to know from this interview. But when Dr. DeMarte arrived in town, I had reached out to Marcia, I think prior to him even arriving, and so we met very early on and had a nice exchange, and a little while later I reached out to him to see how things were going and suggested we meet for coffee, and he agreed. And I said, okay, my office or yours, and he suggested we meet at Lysandro's. And I knew at that moment that he was, in fact, a Jamestown person and had really learned the ropes. And I didn't know who taught him those ropes, but he knew what was going on. So we're just so pleased to have him here. And with no further ado, I will turn things over to Greg Peterson.
Andy Goodell, welcome. Anything happened yesterday? Congratulations. Congratulations. By the way, at Lysandro's, Dr. DeMarte, it's rigs and rocks, and Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if you really want to become part of the local ambience, that's where it's at. Lysandro's Rigs and Rocks. First of all, welcome to Dr. DeMarte's wife, Desiree. Thank you for coming. There's a lot of significance here with the Lucy, Desi, and time won't really permit, I don't think, to talk about Lucy Arnaz sitting in the seat that you were in right there, Desiree. And in 2001, when we actually founded the Jackson Center, we were upstairs. Randy Sweeney of Chautauqua Region Community Foundation passed, and I were upstairs, and we found an actual playbill, which was in the box, and the box said Scottish Rite Review. For those who've been around a while, this used to be known as the Scottish Rite Consistory. We bought it in 2001 from the Scottish Rite Consistory, and they used to have plays here, and this was called the Scottish Rite Review. We opened up the box, and inside the box was a playbill, the first one ever naming Lucille Ball having played right here. And I gave that talk to Lucy Arnaz when she was sitting in that seat right there, Desiree, so your timing and your placement and your name is wonderful. We'll get to you later, Dr. DeMarte. And because we're going to be a little bit later, one of the things that I've been doing my research and homework on you, and we're going to learn more about you as you'll permit us to share, but I did a little research, and I won't tell you how I learned this little fact, but her initials is Marcia Hearn. So that's don't tell him when this comes up. But we do know that you really enjoy certain special things. So I'm going to call on Rich Ryan now, Director of Development of the National Comedy Center. He's the Director of Development. Did I mention that? Director of Development of the National Comedy Center. And he has a special presentation.
I think having Greg Peterson in Jamestown is an appropriate place for a comedy center. And someday we might even induct you in there, huh? Dr. DeMarte, just here on behalf of the Comedy Center to say welcome. We look forward to your leadership at our fine university, and we look forward to years of partnership. One of the pieces of information that Greg Peterson shared with me is that you have an extensive collection of neckties. So, on behalf of the National Comedy Center, we'd like to present you with a National Comedy Center necktie. Welcome to Jamestown.
Yeah, we know that you have this great affinity for a myriad of ties, and we understood you wore that once, I think, meeting the Pope, and the other was the time you actually met somebody in the SUNY system. Is that right?
Yes, close.
Yeah.
I said at the time to some friends, they don't know yet, but it's the last time they'll see me in a tie. Once they said, thumbs up, you're good to go for Jamestown.
What'd your dad do for a living?
My father was a machinist. He worked for Dresser Rand. Before that, I remember it being called Turbidine? Worthington. So he worked as a machinist for 35 years.
And as far as schooling is concerned, was there something that he prompted you to kind of make sure you advanced your schooling, or was that something part of your world?
Perhaps indirectly. I remember first time touring his shop, and I remember leaving thinking, that's not where I want to work. There's got to be something better than this. So indirectly, yes.
As far as siblings in your world?
I have 3 brothers and a sister. I'm number 2 in the lineup of 5. There's 7 years between us. My oldest brother lives in Belfast. The youngest is my sister. She lives just outside Erie. And I have 2 brothers that live in Madison, Wisconsin with their families.
And anything you want to say about them special? This is being filmed, by the way. Did we tell you that?
No.
Okay.
Anything I want to say about them?
Yeah.
It's good to be back here to be able to spend more time with them. We're very close. And for the past probably 20 plus years since we've been away, the only occasions we've been able to come back are for those predictable occasions with somebody either getting married or passing. So we're past that now, and I've already shared a couple of times that I've spent more time with family in the last 12 weeks than I have probably the last 5 or 6 years. So it's a very good thing to be back and to be able to spend time with them. Lots of nieces and nephews at this point. It's great to be with them, and very close to my brothers and sister, yes.
Was it a natural progression that you might go from Bishop Walsh to Alfred? Was that a feeder school there?
No, shortly after I graduated, and I shared this morning in another meeting, I enlisted in the Air Force right out of high school. So 6 weeks after graduation, I was on a bus, headed to Buffalo, and then on a plane headed to Lackland, Texas for basic training. Spent 4 years on active duty. Wonderful experience.
And you enlisted?
I did.
Why?
Oh, let's see. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was not ready for college. I grew up in Angelica, and it was a very small world. My mother used to say to me, I know what you're going to do before you do it. It took me a few years to figure out what that meant. And so getting out of town was a good thing. I wanted to see some of the world, and that's what I did. Yes.
So in the Air Force, what were your duties? What were you assigned to do?
I worked. My first duty assignment was at a large strategic air command base in Plattsburgh. At the time, that base was a large nuclear site, FB-111s and storage of nukes. And part of my job was working in base operations.
Has your paths crossed with Vince Horrigan's yet, or Greg Carlson's, any of those Air Force pilot guys?
Briefly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not enough to have this conversation.
Okay.
Looking forward to it, though.
Well,
have an affinity
they'll
for
look
Air Force
now
pilots.
Now that they know this little nugget, they'll be calling you and sharing your blue wings. Then they came back. Then after you completed your 4 years of duty.
After I completed the 4 years.
Were you deployed at all? Did you go overseas?
Yes. Did some travel to Spain and around the U.S. My last 12 months, I was stationed at King Salmon Air Base, Alaska, outside of Anchorage. Very tiny fishing town. I separated from the Air Force in 1989, came back to Western New York, had the GI Bill at that point, and I had been going to college during the evenings when I could while I was on active duty. By the time I got out, I had almost half my associate's degree finished. And so coming back here, it was natural with the GI Bill to go to Alfred State. It was close to home. I was only there for 2 semesters, moved on to University of Buffalo, finished a degree there in political science. The economy was terrible at that time. You recall in the early 90s. It was a good time to still be in school. And so I enrolled at Buffalo State, went on for a graduate degree. About halfway through that degree, I was recruited out of a class to go to work for Genesee Community College. And that's where my career began in this business in 1992.
Why political science?
I was still confused at that age, thinking I wanted to be an attorney.
Marcia, we should not have led with the tie. I'm sorry.
It became clear quickly, and I was already on the path of political science, but I thought that made sense in terms of prep for law school. And it turns out it wasn't really political science. It was all about Cold War politics. I still don't understand why UB was teaching Cold War politics at that time, but that's what my degree was in.
Because the wall had just come down, right?
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They must have had some leftover books they had to sell. Yeah. Not that ever happens in any other academic institution.
No, it doesn't happen at JCC.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you find yourself Buff State, and you're off being recruited. What did you think about day one when you actually had your job here in the SUNY system?
Wow, that was an experience, because first I was excited to have my first professional job, but my first job, my first day was in Attica State Prison. So I spent 2.5 years working for JCC in their inmate higher education program. And so I would go in and out of Attica and the other prisons we operated in, managing 2 degree programs for 2.5 years.
What was happening in the prison? Was that part of the advanced education program?
No. Inmate higher education programs were somewhat prevalent at the time, and given where GCC was located, it made sense that we had a presence in, I think we were in 5 facilities at the time, and we offered degree programs.
Curious, were some of the lawsuits going on at that time? 71, of course, was the riots. This is 20 years later. Were there any vestiges of that? Did you get a sense of that?
Somewhat. There were other things going on all the time in Attica that were pretty good distractions.
Yeah, like what?
Well, for starters, I had a staff that were a captive audience, including the students. And so, we wanted to, when we taught sociology and criminal justice courses, it was a frequent comment to hear that what we were teaching in the degree programs, they were in the books that we were using to teach. And occasionally there would be a story about what really happened, what really occurred, versus what was in the book.
We just at Attica, we recently had the Pulitzer Prize winning author here, and some of your students were part of that programming, Dr. Heather Thompson, and just fascinating stuff. What was the walkaway? I mean, you don't start from Angelica and work your way into
prison.
Into prison, yeah. And this is a whole small world, huge world exposure.
It was very interesting. It was also in many ways a very good place for me to start. It was GCC was maybe a little bit smaller than JCC at the time. And in a role like the one that I was in, we had to wear many hats. And so I managed a 2-degree program. We had 50 to 75 students that were full-time students, but in that role, I was responsible for everything. I handled the staffing, I handled the orientation, I handled financial aid background checks, making sure the books got in on time. All of that was my responsibility to make sure it worked in that facility. And so it really provided me a really nice overview and exposure to what was possible if I chose at the end of this, not knowing when the end would be, to pursue a career in community colleges.
You were there for almost 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then where?
Well, what happened at the end of my tenure there, Governor Pataki came into office, and some of you may remember that one of the platforms he ran on was eliminating the TAP portion of inmate higher ed. And so when that happened, half the funding for the programs that we were offering in the 5 facilities went away. Shortly after that, the Pell piece followed, and we were without a program. And so they knew it was coming, had a little bit of advance warning, but it was really a turning point for me. It was a point at which I had to step back and ask myself whether or not I wanted a career in this field, or was it time to look for something else. And I looked around the college and I noticed that there were a lot of people in positions that had been there a long time. And so the decision point for me was, if I was going to commit to this, I needed to get into one of the best-known community college programs in the country. There were 3 that I was aware of at the time. And I sort of made a deal. If I could get into one of them, then that was my path. If I didn't get in, then I'm going to find something else to do. I was accepted into the North Carolina State program, and the decision was, that was it. Desiree and I packed up, we left New York and headed for Raleigh.
Having brought up Desiree, how did you guys meet? You brought it up.
That's a story for another time.
Anybody interested to know?
This will be our 25th wedding anniversary in December. I knew the first time I looked at her that I was looking at my soulmate. And that was 3 years before we were married. Actually, it was longer than that. I was home on leave in between going to my, finishing my training and going to my first duty assignment. I stopped out one evening to celebrate with friends at a local establishment and made eye contact with her across the bar. And I don't know how to describe that, but I knew instantly that I was going to spend the rest of my life with her. It didn't happen for a few years after that we were back together. But I knew at that moment that I was looking at my best friend.
When did it click in with her?
That's a good question for her.
Or I'll be eliminated from this one.
When did it click in for you?
Same time. Okay, perfect. Gosh. It'll bring me to tears. Okay. So you find yourself in North Carolina State, and did you become a basketball fan?
Yes, in an intense way. That area does not have professional sports teams. And as Des and I began to hit the social scene, it became risky business to go out between the competitive environment with the basketball teams. North Carolina State, UNC, Duke, Wake Forest. Everything we went to during basketball season was pretty intense. We were very careful about who we were rooting for or not.
Who were you rooting for?
NC State.
Yeah.
I was, but very quietly.
Did you have the gear to hold a little bit? Nothing?
Oh, I had the gear, but I didn't wear it outside the apartment.
That's when you gave up ties?
No.
Because that is intense down there. So you were there, and you launched your path, and that was North Carolina State University, and as part of that, you also were the Associate Director of Research, the National Initiative for Leadership, and how did you segue into that?
One of the reasons why I chose North Carolina in the top 3, I knew the reputation of a couple of professors who were running the program. And at North Carolina State, George Baker, who's been a lifelong mentor since graduating from the program, he was very well known in the business. He was a heavy hitter, authored, conducted a lot of research over a lengthy period of time. And so, I felt if I could get into a program where I could make that kind of a connection, that it would help me launch what came after. And so my first day there, going into that program at the time, we were assigned who would be essentially our dissertation chair on the front end of the program. I wasn't assigned George Baker. I was assigned another professor who was also very well known. So I walk into his office to this well-known professor, and the first thing he says to me is, "Have you read my book?" and he's got a bookshelf full of these books. And I should have been wiser at the time to say yes, but I was anticipating questions coming and not being able to answer them. I said no. I answered honestly. He said to me, "Well, take this and read it, and then come back and talk with me." I had an interview shortly after that with George Baker. I walk into George's office, he sees the book in my hand, and he says, "Let me guess. George told you to read that and come back." I said, "Yes." He said, "Would you like a job?" I said, "Yes." "Go take the book back to George." The job was pretty important. And so I took it back to George, and I went to work for George Baker as running his research operation.
What was it? Could you give us a kind of a Reader's Digest of what it was all about?
The program itself was a doctorate in education, which is a practitioner degree that was mostly about leadership, but the application of it in community colleges. And that was what George Baker at the time and for a long time had written about, was leadership and organizational change. And I wanted to know more about that. It made sense to get a background in that area if I was going to pursue a career in community colleges.
So you were there really till 1998 and then found yourself up in Michigan.
Yes, I was there for 2.5 years, had a fantastic experience. I had just a wonderful experience working on my doctorate degree. And near the end of finishing my first defense of my dissertation, I was ready to go. And I had read enough about community colleges that I kept a list of what I felt were the best based on what I was reading. And I went to George and said to George, I had this conversation, "I'm ready to go. I've gotten past my defense. If I could choose, I'd like to go to one of these 10. He made a call the next day. I had an interview scheduled for the first one on my list. And that was Macomb Community College in Michigan. I wanted the experience at the time going from a smaller institution like JCC to a larger, more complex institution like Macomb, and ideally to work for a leader who was also really well known and to be, a head, a czar in the business of community colleges. And so, just a wonderful experience. I go to the interview, and at the end of the interview with the president, he said to me that we don't have a job for you, but we have some money. Here's what we'll do. We'll hire you for 12 months. During that 12 months, we'll give you anything we want you to tackle. And over this time and process, if there's a match between your skill set and what we need, we'll see where that takes us. So he was taking a risk on me. Had the money but didn't have a job. 6 months into it, I was asked to interview for an internal position, and from that point on, had a wonderful career at Macomb.
And during that time in Warren, Michigan, did you become a Tigers fan?
I did.
Okay. Wally, you hearing this? Good. It's good if you're going to play to your chairman. Let's keep talking Tigers.
And I'm still a Tigers fan.
You were there for 9 years.
Yes.
What did you see the growth? What did you see as a kind of a being in one place, which was a significant, pretty large place, as far as just the transition of the community college concept? You know, you have a pretty good eye there for almost 10 years.
It was a very interesting time to be there. You know, when we first moved there, we would hear for probably the first, I remember hearing this constantly the first 2 to 3 years, that however the big three went, General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, that was the way the market moved. But by the time we left, 9 years later, that wasn't said anymore. I mean, that's how much it changed that was there. That was from what was going on. I shared this also recently. There's this saying we have in community colleges that when the economy goes south, our enrollments go up. Well, the economy was not good there the entire 9 years we were there, and our enrollments were not climbing. They were declining. There was a steady decline not as precipitous as what we're seeing around the country now, but there was this steady decline that was occurring. And at one time, Macomb was the largest community college. In fact, they wore buttons in the early 80s that said University of Michigan, Michigan State, Macomb. So it was right up there in terms of size as one of the larger public institutions. Well, they fell from that acknowledgement, and it shifted the conversation over time. There's this constant drumbeat focused on enrollment. That conversation, I got to see that change front and center. It shifted away from enrollment. It was more about what's the right number that we can handle given who we are and the resources we have. That changed our approach. And it was a difficult conversation, but in many ways it was a very healthy conversation. And it may be one in time that we need to have here in Jamestown.
We may come back to that in a few minutes. Then you find your way on Wisconsin, Green Bay Packers. I know that's a team that you do follow. Mm-hmm. This was Brett Favre time period?
Brett Favre, yes. The end of his time period, and it lingered for a couple of years, and it was not nice. Yes, it was the end of Brett Favre's era, and and the next team transitioning into place. Very exciting time to be there.
Was that, as you're launching, what skill set did you might have added while you were in Wisconsin?
How to navigate very cold weather. They counted the days that were below zero, and I jokingly say that it was so cold there some days that my GPS, you could hear her teeth chatter when she was directing me which way to go. One of the differences in the Wisconsin system, what is really their strength, is they're so technically focused. They're not, many of them are not comprehensive institutions like a JCC, so they don't offer the breadth of transfer programs, although the college I was at, Northeast Wisconsin Tech, they did offer some, but for the most part, it's a technical college system. And so those technical programs, they operate very well. They're heavily connected with the businesses, and they track their students in a way that you don't typically see in a more comprehensive institution.
Were you getting a reputation in the community college world? Did you get a sense that you were the go-to guy for certain areas of administration, so that headhunters were looking for you?
That takes us to Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we left Wisconsin and headed to Tidewater Community College, headquartered in Norfolk, but operated campuses in 4 cities. Very large place, larger than Macomb. I think about 4 years into the assignment as the chief academic officer there, I was at a statewide conference listening to a panel discussion on open educational resources. And at the end of the discussion, the person who I think is the godfather around OER, he just casually made this comment that there was enough OER out there that a college could create an entire degree and eliminate the cost of textbooks. And so after the panel finished, I approached him and asked him if that was true. And he said it was. And so I asked him if he would help Tidewater prove that that was possible. And he agreed. 12 months later, we proved that it was possible to eliminate textbooks without compromising the quality of the degree, replace it with resources that were free, and in the process, our goal was to eliminate the cost of textbooks as a barrier for students to either go to college or stay in college. We proved that was possible. A small team of faculty did the heavy lifting over a 9-month period. We launched, and they are now in their 6th year. And so when we launched, word was leaking out, and we started getting calls from other colleges. It was, what were we doing? Could we share it with them? I felt it was premature because we were in pilot mode, and I didn't want to say anything publicly until I had the data to support it. But the cat was out of the bag. And so we began to share the numbers, and they were astounding. In 3 years' time, we saved students over $1 million conservatively in the cost of textbooks. Led the way. Now there's a national effort that's probably 3 years following us that's funded over 50 colleges around the country. And actually, there are a lot more to do exactly what we did at Tidewater. So we coined the phrase the Z degree, zero textbook cost, and that is, if you Google it now, you would see thousands of hits in colleges that have replicated what we started at Tidewater.
And I did that. I Googled it, and in fact, one of the things you'll see on the Open Policy Network program, they talk about in 2016 Institute for Open Leadership, there was a group of people named as fellows, and in this list, and I say it's pretty long, but it's impressive, there's folks from South Africa, Uganda, Nepal, Bangladesh, New Zealand, Canada, Nigeria, Tunisia, and the only one from the United States in this Open Leadership Forum as a fellow was Daniel DeMarte. Congratulations.
Thank you.
He'll provide his autograph later. So does that have a play? I mean, does the Z part, does it have a play at Jamestown Community College?
I hope it does.
Yeah.
I haven't really tested the waters yet, but I think if we wanted to create an identity, one of the things that we could do, we could be, if we wanted to be, we could be the first college in the country that goes all Z in everything we offer. If we wanted to, we could be the first college that eliminated textbooks altogether. Elimination doesn't mean that students don't have the option. But we could do that, and I have enough friends around the country now that that we could call on those experts to come and work with us and make this happen. So if that's something we want to do, the time is ripe and the resources are there to make that happen.
You become president of Jamestown Community College. What was the experience like in one considering to apply, and what was the process?
It was a very good process. The consideration, I don't know how to describe that. You're smiling. Yeah, it was, it felt in the application process early on, I felt like I was being pulled here. I don't know how to describe it, but I felt the connection. I don't know why, but it was there. I didn't feel it wanting to come here until I came. And after I went through the interview process and I met the board, the staff, and members of the community, that was the other half. And I left the interview wanting to come here. So it became more than just the pull. Having been here and had the interactions in Jamestown and Olean and Dunkirk, it felt right. And it felt right all through the process, start to finish. Process took a little longer than it needed to. Mm-hmm. But that was beyond, that was because of circumstances which I don't fully understand. That was beyond anybody's control. Mm-hmm. But overall, the process has been, it was good. It was positive.
You started when?
My first day on the job was July 30th.
What's been the surprise?
There hasn't, mostly what I thought I saw during the interview process has been confirmed. There are some small surprises, and I don't know that I would call them surprises. One of the things that I like very much about JCC, and I like everything, I see that next generation in our faculty and staff, and I think that bodes very well for the future of the college. And so that's not something I have seen at the other places I've been, at least not to the extent that I see it here at JCC. So that's been very good. And then to take that outside the college, I see a similar energy in the community, in leaders in the community like Tory and Michael Hill and others. And so it feels to me like there's an alignment of sorts going on in the region that position us to do what needs to come next, whatever that is, to continue what's been a very wonderful story here. Actually, I would put a surprise in there, and this continues to evolve for me. I've visited so far maybe a dozen businesses. It is stunning to see the diversity in the businesses, the jobs that are here, the history, the reach that this region has on the world. I don't, who has that composite picture of what we have done in Western New York and the impact we've had. I'm sure it's out there. I've not seen it yet, but I'm experiencing it in these visits with the businesses. It's incredible. I don't know how we get that story out. I don't know how, we need to find a way to expose our students to the richness and the diversity of what we have as resources here in our community. That's been a pleasant surprise.
You talked about your experience in Macomb and how there was during that time period the shift of focus from enrollment to really, I don't want to say, maybe better said, right-sizing to fit that. And that's a discussion to have maybe here at some point. Do you see that as an issue here so that would lend itself to that discussion?
Well, our enrollment is down. Our funding model historically for most community colleges is based on enrollments. Now that's beginning to change. Having spent the last 9 years in Virginia, the last 3 years, the state introduced a performance-based funding model, and some of our funding began to shift on completion, not just on the front end with enrollments. I think that discussion, I don't know how that discussion does not come to New York State. And so there's the funding piece that's part of this, but whether or not that piece comes, we are funded on enrollment, and as long as that's the case, and our enrollment is down, we're going to have challenges with the budget and have to look at how do we become more efficient and more effective with the resources we have. Now, I've said and I've already shared that I would rather not lose any faculty or staff at this point. I don't know if that's realistic, but that is not what I would like to happen. And some of that has already happened. We've already taken significant steps over the last 5 to 6 years doing some of that right-sizing. There's only so much right-sizing you can do before you're cutting into our ability to fulfill our mission. I think we're pretty close to that. And so that conversation is coming, and certainly all options are on the table, but I do think there are other steps we can take before we have to go the route of right-sizing staff.
How do you see the community helping you in that discussion? In one sense, it's an internal discussion. The other sense is an external discussion. You've been meeting businesses. You've been seeing how they have their needs, and often they look to community colleges to provide that technical support and assistance. How do you draw that balancing of just assets that you can draw from?
Well, the board gave me 4 priorities coming in to focus on programs, partnerships, resources, and the vision and figuring out where it is we want to be looking into the future. And so a fair amount of my energy with my team, and I see most of them here, that's exactly what we're doing, is we're looking at where we have opportunity that perhaps we've overlooked in each one of those areas. In terms of programs, that's our product. We have done very well, and our history shows that what we do in the transfer arena is very strong, very positive. And so we continue what we do there, but we need to do a better job where there's opportunity augmenting that with meeting the business needs where those needs are. And that's going to require us then to rethink how we package and deliver programs, do it in a way that's more flexible, more responsive to business needs. That's one piece of the puzzle. And some of these things we already have going on. We can do a better job, I think, hitting the adult student market, both the workers who are either not in the workforce or who are looking for a transition into another position with another company. That's an area where we could focus more of our energy and resources in a bigger and better way than we have to this point. So on the program side, there are definitely some opportunities there. In terms of partnerships, in each one of these areas, one of the things that is a theme that I see, having listened to the community, interacted with the businesses, there's a certain amount of revitalization that's going on in all the communities that I visited. We've got to revitalize in those 4 areas to match the pace that's going on in the communities and to help do our part in making that happen. Partnerships are a key part of that. And so rethinking what have we done well in partnerships, where haven't we gone in partnerships that we need to think about. And not necessarily go it alone, but do it in ways that, that perhaps we're not right now in structuring partnerships. Foundations play a key role in that.
Yeah. Marcia Hearn told me that you are not a man who likes to waste time and wants to make the most of that time that you are engaged in any activity. I, too, feel that I don't want to waste your time, but what's the question we haven't asked that we need to ask and learn about you? What is it that we're missing?
I hope that what you see is what you get. I don't know. I don't know. Can we open it up to that question with? Yes?
Took the words right out of my mouth. What you see is what you get. That's no truer words were ever spoken.
I don't know that this is the answer you're looking for, but I've been asked. This is everybody. People here are wonderful. In the college, outside the college, they're wonderful, and everybody asks, "How are we settling in?" There is no settling in because we're home. We are settled. And the next question or comment that's made is, "We hope you like it here, and we hope you like it here, and you're going to stay." Well, we don't intend on. There's no plan for us to swoop in and stay for a few years and then leave. We're here and committed to doing our part in serving the college and the community.
I think on behalf of all of us, we're thrilled that you and Desiree are here. So ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Daniel and Desiree DeMarte. Thank you. And just a news note, there is Tory.
He's kind of like, well, Barnum and Bailey, I don't know, something like that. But Greg never disappoints in the way that he draws out of people things they may or may not have known they were going to share. So thank you for that. And Greg does tons of research, and he turns over lots of stones and gets people to tell him things. So thank you, Greg, for dedicating time to this. And just thank you to Daniel and to Desiree for opening their lives to us a little bit here today. The time passed very, very quickly. I was writing things down that I thought I needed to remember for later. Jamestown Community College it's not a surprise to anyone in this room that Jamestown Community College is tremendously important to our region. It is a treasure. It is an institution that we need to take very special care of now more than ever before. And so I'm just very grateful that Dr. DeMarte and his wife have chosen to come and be stewards of that treasure. And the Community Foundation, we line up next to JCC in many, many ways, one of which is in helping to provide students with a way to access higher education. And we hope every single one of them start at Jamestown Community College, and we know that that is a tremendous way for them to begin. So we are here to support you in those new endeavors and in all the challenges that you may encounter. And so I thank all of you for coming. There are sweet treats at the top of the stairs, so please help yourself. If you feel like you shouldn't have one before dinner, if it might spoil your dinner, take one with you on the way out, because we at the Community Foundation do not need to eat all of those sweet treats alone. So thank you for spending time, and I know that Dr. DeMarte would love to talk with you.